We'll do a review of the Sichas in Chelek Yut Tes. This is the third Sicha for the Parshas Devarim. This is a Rashi Sicha in which it seems at the first glance that the Rashi is quoting from the Sifri and the Medrash. And the Rebbe points out that there is actually a difference between the way Rashi brings this down. Rebbe is going to explain various different specific language that Rashi uses, which tells us that it's different than the way in the Sifri and in the Medrash. And basically, as the Rebbe will explain, over here we're talking about the blessings in which Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Yidden that Hashem should add to them 1,000 times as much. And then he says, Hashem will bless you as he spoke to you. The difference between the blessing that Moshe Rabbeinu gives 1,000 times and the blessings which Hashem has given them, the difference is because while 1,000 times is a large number, but yet the blessings of Hashem are totally not numbered. They're not limited because they're not numbered at all. It's blig vul. So the difference between the blessing of Moshe and the blessing of Hashem is a difference between a limited blessing or an unlimited blessing. Whereas according to the Medrash and the Sifri and the Medrash, the difference is the quantity in the amount of blessing, that the blessings that Moshe Rabbeinu gave are limited to 1,000, and the Eibishter's numbers are much greater. But it's not gvul versus bligvul, limit versus unlimited, but it's one limit versus a much greater limit. As we'll see inside, the Rebbe will also explain the Chelek according to Pnimius Ha'inyonim, whether it's Keser versus Atzilus, or it's in Atzilus itself, Chachma versus Bina, as we will see in the Sikha. Let's look inside. Aleph. From Posuk Hashem Elikei Aviseichem, Yosef Aleichem Kochem. May Hashem, the God of your father, add to you as such 1,000 1,000 times. Then it says, V'yivorech eschem kasher diber lochem, and he shall bless you as he had spoken to you. Is Rashi maitik diverter? Rashi quotes from the verse, the words, Yosef aleichem kochem 1,000. May he add to you as such 1,000 times. When he's mefarish, and he explains, okay, mahu shuv vivorech eschem kasher diber lochem. After Hashem already says that he shall bless you 1,000 times, what is it again that he says, let him bless you like he spoke to you? So why is the verse saying something further after saying that may Hashem bless you 1,000 times? Then he says again, he should bless you as he spoke to you. Hello. But rather what this is telling us, Amru Loi, what the Yidden said to him, they said, Moshe, Aton noisin kitzva libir choseinu. You are giving a limit to our blessings. Moshe Rabbeinu said 1,000 times such, so that means it's limited to 1,000. But their argument of the Bnei Yisrael is Kvar Hivtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Es Avraham. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has already promised Avraham Asher Im Yuchal Ish Limonis V'Goymer, that if a person can count at all. So basically, by Moshe Rabbeinu saying to them 1,000 times as much, he's limiting the blessing to 1,000 times. And Hashem has already promised that you won't even be able to count them at all. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu respond? Amar lahem. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Yidden, to the Bnei Yisrael, Zu mishalihi. When I'm saying Yisrael Lechem Kochem Elapam, that is my blessing to you. Avalhu Yivorich Eschem Kasher Diber Lachem. But Hashem, He will bless you as He had spoken to you, which means I'm giving you a blessing, a limited blessing of thousands. And the Eibishter will give you this believable blessing. Now the Rebbe said, let's compare this Rashi to the source of Rashi, and we'll see how Rashi changes around and is different than it is in the Sifri and the Medrash. The Mokir from the Pirush Rashi is from Sifri and Medrash. The source of this Rashi is in the Sifri and Medrash. In Sifri state, in Sifri it says, Amru Loi Rabbeinu Moshe, the Yidden said, our master Moshe, it is impossible for us that you bless us. Why? Now he quotes here different Pesukim, as the Rebbe will point out, than Rashi brought down. First he quotes the Pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yivtichas Avraham Avinu, Hashem promised Avraham our father. Amar, he said, I will increase your seed as the stars in the heaven. Now, really, already the Rebbe brings the note over here. This is really a pasuk that's said by Yitzchak, but we're not going to go into that. There's different gears over there. But anyways, here it brings down, it says clear Avraham Avinu, some says Lavisenu, but he brings the pasuk over here, which is said by Yitzchak. Actually, Rashi says it on Avraham Avinu, but over here it says, it brings the pasuk here, I will increase your seed like the stars in the skies. Rashi brings, and the Medrash, and the Sifri brings another pasuk. Also the pasuk of V'samti Ezaracho Kafar Ha'oretz. That's the same pasuk like Rashi brings down, but Rashi brings down the end of the pasuk that you won't be able to count. And in the Sifri, he brings down the beginning of the pasuk, V'samti Ezaracho Kafar Ha'oretz. I will place your seed like the sand of the earth. So these are two psukim that the Yidden were quoting and saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem has promised us these promises of being like the stars and like the sand. He promised Avraham Avinu, and you are giving a limit for our blessing. So this is Moshul Lemelachu. Brings down in the Sifri, the Rebbe will bring it down later in the Sikha. The Sifri brings down the emotional of a king, that a king left his young son. He didn't want to give him everything because he was afraid that the son will waste everything that he gives him. So he puts an apotropos, he puts an attendant to be in charge. And when the kid grows up, the kid says to the apotropos, says to the son of the king, he says, everything that I've given you, that was of mine. And now what your father has given you, that's a whole nother left for you separately. So the same thing is, Omar lahem Moshe Yisrael. So Moshe says to the Hashem Elikei Aveiseichem Yosef Aleichem Kochem Elef Pamim. So Hashem, the God of your father, should add to you 1,000 times. Zumishali, that's like the apotropos in that case, that this is mine, what I promise you, my blessing to you. Zumishali Yeshlachem, that is to you from mine. However, he is going to bless you like he spoke to you, like the sand of the Yamim, like the grass of the Adam, like the fish in the ocean, and like the stars in the heaven. As the Rebbe is going to point out later on, so you see here, the Medrash keeps on giving examples over here from a large amount of Afaroretz and Chechvashamayim and the Gehayom, all a tremendous quantity. He's saying that, well, Moshe Rabbeinu gave you a limited quantity. Here is a quantity which is much greater than that. And the Rebbe will use that according to the Medrash, as the Rebbe will explain later on, the issue is, why say 1,000 when there's a lot more than 1,000? And the answer to that is Moshe Rabbeinu says, I say 1,000. And then there's a lot more quantity to come, like all these psukim. Then the Medrash is also similar to the Sifri. The Medrash Zokt. The Medrash is also similar. It says, Kach Amru Lo Yisrael. So said to him the Yidden, Rabbeinu Moshe, our master Moshe. HaKadosh Baruch Hu leinosan kitzva libircheseinu. Hashem did not give a limit to the blessings. And you said 1,000 times. So he said to them, that which I have blessed you, that was from myself is what I'm blessing you. He will bless you as he spoke to you. The differences between the different Lashonos is going to be pointed out in the following of the Sikha, to point the differences the way Rashi says and the way it's in the Sifri and the Medrash. And you study superficially the meaning in the Rashi's commentary, the Oich in Sifri Medrash, and also in the Sifri Medrash, is the Taina von Eden given that what was the argument of the Eden? The bracha from the Ebersten is bli kitzva. Hashem's blessing is without any limitation. As Eden werden sein b'mispor on agvul, that they are going to be, their numbers is going to be without a limit. So how come Moshe is giving them a blessing? He said, like you, 1,000 times was hota kitzba hagbola. That does have a limit. It has a defined amount. It has a limitation. The visa is over nidmuma. That is not understood. Favos is Rashi Mishane. Why does Rashi change? On Haupton with der Shaila in Kefel Habrochim Pasuk. Where Rashi starts his commentary is not by asking the question that this is a limit, and he's limiting as it is in the Sifri and the Medrash. Rashi starts off the question, why does he duplicate? After he says, Yosef Hashem Kochem Elapamim, so Rashi says, why is he duplicating in the Pasuk? Mahu, as Rashi quotes, Mahu Shuvi Vorech Eschem Kasher Diber Lochem. So why is he again saying, let him bless you, that he spoke to you? He already gave them the bracha. So why is he saying again? So the issue at hand is, why is it repetitive? Why is it saying again, Hashem Vivorech Eschem Kasher Diber Lochem? Und nicht mit dem Vater sein, die Teile von Eden zu Moshe. It's not, Rashi doesn't start by saying that there's an argument from the Eden to Moshe. As if to say, to Rashi, that doesn't seem that was the issue. Rashi's issue was, why is it repeating itself? But not that the Yidden's argument that the blessing is not, that Rashi doesn't start with that, the in Sifri Medrash. That's the way the Sifri and the Medrash, they start saying, why are you limiting the bracha? Rashi doesn't start that. Ubefrat, especially, this is obvious, more obvious, as es is nicht darkisch or Rashi beperushet zu Oistaichen, the Schwierigkeit in Posig. Rashi doesn't usually explain what's difficult in the verse. Nor gleich mit dem Pirush in Divrei HaKosov. But Rashi starts giving the explanation without telling you why he needs to explain it, what the problem is. Like spoke many times. Over here, it's unusual that Rashi says, well, why does he repeat himself? Rashi brings down the question instead of Rashi just giving the answer. So that means that Rashi is actually not trying to tell you that what's bothering me over here is not just that it seems like it's limiting versus the bracha of Moshe, but rather what's bothering me over here is why do we need a repetitive bracha? So why is that? Why is that not problematic for Rashi that it's a limiting? That's what the Rebbe is going to explain. Why is it that with Rashi? But the Rashi's main concern here is why repeat the bracha? And the Rebbe says further base. Afilu when es volt nit given the kushya mahu shuvchulu. Let's say we don't have the question. It seems like Muzman Zog Muzum Mishalihi. We still have to come on to this commentary of Rashi. But the first part is Moshe Rabbeinu's Mishalihi. Kidei is only zayin bistira to the brachas freer ashrim yuchol goymer. Because we already learned before that you cannot count. This is already in the pasuk, and he is saying Yosef Hashem Kochem Elef, only 1,000. So we have an issue. How could he say 1,000 when the Eibishter gave? So we need explanation in the pasuk of itself, even though if it wasn't redundant, we have a problem. So Rashi needs to address it. So Rashi's explanation that this is from Hashem and this is Moshe's needs to be said even without the issue that it's a repetitive over here. That's an extra bracha. Gimel. Then you see also the verse that Rashi brings is different than the verse put down in the Medrash, in the Sifri in the Medrash. Rashi, why does Rashi say what were they proving when the Yidden were complaining on the limitation of the brachas of Moshe Rabbeinu? So it says, that is because Hashem promised Asher im yuchal ish limonis, whether somebody can count. Nitvi in Sifri, this is different than it's in the Sifri, was the Raya ver gebracht von Hascholas Avtocher. Over there, the proof is brought from the beginning of the promise of that person. It says, "V'samti es arachal kafar ha'oretz." I will place your seed like the sand of the earth, and then the pasuk continues, "Asher yuchal ish lemones." And in the Sifri, that comes in addition to the other pasuk he brings from Parshas Toldis, from Bayitzchok, of them virbeses arach chech v'shamayim. So over there he brings from this, it's like the dust in addition to, besides chech v'shamayim. And Rashi brings only Asherim Yuchal Ish Lemonos. Can you count it? As the Rebbe will explain, because Rashi's issue is not the quantity, but the fact is that it can't be counted at all. We'll see. Dalad. Bald as Rashi bavor nordem inyan hakitzva from Elapaumim. Since Rashi is only entering over here the limitation that we say 1,000 times, if Avos is a mighty from Posik diverter Yosef Aleichem Kochem. So how come he quotes from the verse also the words Yosef Aleichem Kochem, which he's not really explaining? He's only explaining the Elapam base. So this is where you see that Rashi brings different psukim, differs a little bit from the Medrash in the Sifri. And then we need to understand some general question over here in this pasuk, which seems to be difficult, especially in the wording of Rashi versus the Medrash. What kind of a value is there to Moshe's blessing? Elef Pa'amim, when we already have the blessing of Hashem, which is limited, unlimited. So why do we need Moshe's Rabbeinu's blessing? It turns out that Hashem's blessings should include Moshe Rabbeinu's blessings as well. So why does Moshe have to bless them, B'chlal? So in the Medrash and in the Sifri, in the Medrash, the Meforshim will answer that God's blessing may be conditional, maybe it's different times, Ne'elam Habod, Ne'elam Hazeh, the various, but those answers fit in the Medrash and the Sifri, but they don't seem to fit in Rashi. Rashi, there is no hint, so we need to understand what's the value of Moshe Rabbeinu's blessing in the face of having Hashem's blessing, a limitless blessing. Base. Also, we need to understand, this is the main thing we need to understand, was Meforshim frag. Did that Meforshim ask? Was geht zu die Bracha von Moshe Rabbeinu? What does the blessing of Moshe Rabbeinu add? The bracha von Elef Pa'amim, this blessing 1,000 times, is the chnichla lumbotel, that is included and that is subjugated, becomes bottled to the blessing in the bracha from the Ebersten Asher Diber Lachem. It's included and it's subjugated in the blessing, next to the blessing from Hashem that He's spoken to you. Was is bligvul v'kitza, which is without any limitation. There's no amount. Ubimekolshkin from Kal V'Chomer from Klala Yidu and for sure the Kal V'Chomer, we know the rule is yesh b'chlal masai moneh, that within 200 that includes 100 as well. So in the Ebershter's bracha, bligvul v'kitzva is included 1,000 times. So why do we need the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu b'chlal? So Meforshim for answering the kasher. So the commentaries answer this question that Aleph, number one, Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu is verbunden mit Tnai, that the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tied to a condition. Uzikum Norven Eden Zainen Mekayim Torah Mitzvahs, and that comes only when Yidden observe Torah Mitzvahs. Masha'enken Birchas Moshe, as opposed to the blessing of Moshe, is nit abhängig in kein Tnai, is not hinged at any condition. That's one interpretation. Other bays or another interpretation, what is the addition to Moshe? So the first interpretation says Hashem's blessings come conditional on observing Torah mitzvahs. So Moshe Rabbeinu adds, even if they don't observe, they still have his blessings. And number two, Birchas Moshe's Chal Bizman Hazeh. Moshe's blessing applies today. Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'zayin lo asid lo, that's going to be in the future to come. These terutzim fit in the Sifri and the Medrash, but they don't fit in Rashi. But the terutzim, zayna masim, these reasons fit nor leuten Sifri and Medrash only according to the Sifri and Medrash. Why? Because the Medrash brings the Sifri, brings Amoshul. The Sifri brings the parable. Lemelech shehoyu lo nechosim harba. A king who had many assets, lots of assets, and he had a small son, and he needed to leave to overseas. Omar, and he says, if I will leave my assets in the hands of my son, he's going to stand up, he's going to spend it all, he's going to lose it all. I am going to appoint an attendant, an apotropos, until he gets big, until he becomes an adult. Once that son becomes adult, so the Apatrupa says to the son, anything I've given you over the time, I've given you mine. But your father, that's keep it for you. In this example, we see that we're talking about two different times. We're talking about the time of the Apatrupas. We're talking about the time that the Apatrupas is given. So there's different times, like we're explaining that the bracha of the Eibishter and the bracha of Moshe are in two different times. But the fun is verstandig, as the bracha von Eibishter, that the blessing of Hashem is nicht in selben Zman. It's not the same time. Like we're saying, this could be La'os Lovei, and this is Bizman Hazeh. And in selben Maim the Matzav Ben also is not the same standing as now, as when he does mitzvah, doesn't do mitzvahs. But then as tut sich oiv the bracha von Apatrupa Moshe. It's in a different time than when the bracha of Moshe. Moshe is in one condition, one situation, one time. Then the Eibishter bracha is different. Move on from Loshen HaMedrash, and the Moshel also the Loshen Medrash. In this Moshel over there it says, Kishayovi HaMelech. He says when the king will come. Uninimshal, he brings in the parable Kishayovi HaKadosh Baruch Hu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you see, we're talking about a time before HaKadosh Baruch Hu come, before the Melech, and after HaMelech, after HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes. And the zwei brachas einen in zwei besondere Zmanim, that these two blessings are in two separate times. Oh, but in Pirush Rashi, but when we come to Rashi's commentary, who explains the simple meaning of the verse, when there's Stam, he just says it plain without telling times. Zumishali, this is mine. He will bless you as he promised you. From the month of Urim, he doesn't even hint to any of the previous explanation. He's move on. So then it's understood that we don't have to come and say that there's different time. As a Sisdo, a Hasbore Pshuta, that there is a simple explanation, was a Loit Pirush Rashi according to Rashi. But the Rashi, it doesn't have to hint, it's not talking about separate times, but there's something very simply that we can understand in the Rashi itself. And basically, as the Rebbe will explain, that Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha is also represented that great bracha of the Eibishter, but just as a human being, he has to express it in a certain way. He says, it's all Hashem Elikechem. It's the Hashem's bracha. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, but Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, there's the way I can say Hashem's bracha, which express itself because Moshe Rabbeinu is limited in the way of Eschem Elef, and then there's the way that Hashem expresses it, but it's one and the same bracha, and it's not less or more, but it's different, expressed in different languages, as we will see, and the continuation of the Sikh. Oish Gimel, the Bir Bazet. So the Rebbe is going to explain now that it's not really a question why Moshe Rabbeinu is limiting. Whether he didn't have a taina that Moshe Rabbeinu, explaining in Rashi, why Moshe Rabbeinu was limiting the bracha that he said 1,000, the Eibishter says legal. Because first of all, a human being is only able to talk about limited things. Person who is limited, you can't add up from a limited amount of brachas to unlimited. And on the other hand, when we say it, the Eibishter says that you can't count, doesn't really mean also unlimited, because the language of be so much like you can't count it doesn't mean literally, just means it'll be a huge number that you won't be able to count. So it's not such a disparity between the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu and the bracha of Hashem. Let's look inside. Gimel. The beer was that explanation of this. Lefi pshuto shel mikra, according to the simple meaning of the pasuk. Even according to drush and the sifri and the medrash, it's also is kinkasha need. It's not a question. Farvos Moshe is magbil the bracha. How come Moshe is limiting the blessing? He says elef pa'amim. B'shas that Ebershon's bracha is given as the Zayin King Gvul v'kitzot mispar. That they're limiting the bracha, and the Hashem's bracha was there's going to be no boundary. There's no limit to the number. It's not a question. But a mensch, wie groß is doch als anivra mugval. He's still a limited creation. Because it says in Sifrei Hakira that you can't have unlimited in limited. Basically, what the Rebbe is saying over here, that it is not a question why Moshe Rabbeinu would say 1,000 and limited, because a person is limited to numbers. It says, it's explained in the Sforim of Chakira, as von Mukbil dicke Sachen können sich nicht zusammenkleiden maribui, was ist Blickwohl und Mispar Mamish, that from limited matters, you cannot gather from defined and limited matter such a much which would be without a limit and actually without numbers. You can't say something which is made up from numbers cannot be endless, cannot be unlimited. So we give the example is the Hemshech von Zman can nicht sein on a certain. The continuation of time cannot be without an end, without a limit, without boundaries. You can't say time will go on forever. Why? Baldasman is zunächst gestellt geworden von der Goyim, shows Yom. So what is time? Time is made up of seconds, hours, and days. So if you should say that it's endless, so endless amount of days, endless amount of hours, endless amount of seconds. So it seems like the endless amount of days would be less than the endless amount of hours, and the endless amount of seconds will be less than the endless amount, will be less than the amount of hours, because they are, there's more seconds in the hour, and there's more hours in the days. So there will be a different level of unlimited in each one of them. So it'll turn out as ein bligvul is größer von a zweiten bligvul, that one unlimited will be greater than the other bligvul. So we'll say that their bligvul von shoes, the unlimited amount of hours within the unlimited infinite time. The unlimited amount of hours, but yet every hour contains many instances. So we're going to say relative to the unlimited of seconds, it has a lot more bligvul than the going, because they are within the hour. There is more, a lot more seconds, because the seconds are smaller parts in the hour. So if there's an unlimited amount of hours, there would be a greater unlimited amount of the seconds. When it's can it sein, but that's not possible. If we're talking about unlimited, can it sein, ein bligvul größer von a zweiten bligvul, one bligvul to be greater than the other one. Look at the. So basically, if it's something which is made up of finite parts, it cannot really be infinite. And therefore, a human being who is made up, who's a finite and there's a limit, cannot talk about unlimited. So that's from the part of the person. Then on the other hand, when we talk about Hashem's blessings, which it says, the unlimited, is also not meant unlimited. It only means that it's not something, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's an expression. It says that you cannot count it, or it's like descent, but it doesn't mean that it's literally unlimited. B'chlal, b'pashtet retzich in sifri, u'medrash, nit wegen bligvul mamish. There also is not talking about actually bligvul. Nor wegen a misper godl b'yosef. It's talking about a very large number. The broche from Obersten, the base says that I will increase your seed like the stars in the skies, and I will place them like the sand of the earth. Without mentioning any number. What does this mean? That there's going to be such a great, so many of them, such a large number of them, that it becomes difficult to count. It's such a large number. So take, for example, the sand of the ocean, so Avram Avinu, which is the promise to Avram our father, as the sand that's on the edge of the Yam. Also in the Sifri, he also concludes, uses Kichol Yamim, like the sand of the ocean. That has a number. There is a number of sand, but Aberzai Mispar is in Azaribu in Muflog. It is in such a great number, so much as mitzeltim nit asher lo yisofer meroiv. You don't count it because there's so much. It doesn't mean that there is no limit, but we're talking about such a large number that because the number is so large, you can't count it. Is mukhrach by, as you can see this, that this is the meaning of there, not that there's really no count, but people don't count it, is the pasuk vayitzber Yosef bor kichol hayom harbe me'oid ad kichod lisper ke'em lisper, so that Yosef collected the food as the sand of the sea, so much until you can no longer count it because there's no number. So it's understood, Choch is move on, it's understood, it's not pshat, it was actually unlimited. As the Eichel Sheva Shonim, the food for the 7 years, was Yosef that Moshe, that Yosef gathered together, and he placed it within the city. So it was limited, it was in space, it was limited. He's given big wool. That was all within boundaries, was with limit. Not that it's given, but even muflak, but it was with a tremendous amount, a lot, a great number. The far chodel lisper has sofer lisper. That's why the one who counts stopped counting. Ki ein mispar, because there is no number. It doesn't mean there is no number. It's unlimited means from the misparim was sailors nutz. Those numbers that counters use. There were so many food that they don't count this anymore. Not that there is bligvul, but it's not something that is countable because people don't count it anymore. Oh, das ist given Leuten Sifri umedrash the tiny to Moshe. So what was the argument to Moshe as the Sifri and the Medrash bring down? Because like we said before, Rashi doesn't bring this down as an argument. Rashi brings down why is it duplicate the bracha, not that there is a problem. But according to the Sifri and Medrash, what's given the tiny to Moshe? What was the argument to Moshe? Elef pa'amim is kitzva libirchaseinu. When you say 1,000 times, you are putting a amount, a number, a figure to our blessings. As in Magbil, you are limiting their bracha, which means basically not making from blik gvul, but making a much lesser number than it was. As is asacha klenderet so, wie der Eibishter hat gesagt, it becomes a much lesser number than what Hashem said. 1,000 is accountable. People count, say 1,000, but that is much less. That's much less than the kitzvah. That's much less than the Eibishter saying it can't be counted, which means a much greater number. But this is only a problem for the Sifri Medrash. But in Pshuta Shel Mikra, it's not such a problem because 1,000 times is quite a number. The Rebbe is going to explain 1,000 times the amount of Yidden. We're talking about people were 2 million people, and 1,000 times as much would be 2 billion, and there's a limit. So it seems a pretty sizable number, even what Moshe Rabbeinu has said. Oh, but in Pshuta Shel Mikra, is the snit or azah kasha? It's not such a strong question. Rashi doesn't bring that question down. Well, Ella Pomim from the Mispor from Eden Damu, because having 1,000 people of the number of the Jews then is a ribuy muflik b'yoseh. That would be a huge number, very great number, a huge big number at that time. So there's not a question to say why you're limiting, because Moshe Rabbeinu was not a limit. Saying 1,000 times as much is 2 billion, as the Rebbe explained. The Rebbe hoped on Rashi al derech in Sifri Medrash. Rashi does not start as the Sifri Medrash with a problem. With Omru Loi, that they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vibald. So there's not a question according to Rashi. But Vibald Ober in Posuk Stelzach the Shaila. But we have a question in the Posuk itself. Mahu Shuv Vivorech Eschem Kasher Dibur Lochem. Why does the Posuk say again that Hashem will bless you as He had spoken to you? So then this forces us to say that they said to him, yes, there is something about just limiting. As the Rebbe will explain, it's not like Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Rashi, it's not like Moshe Rabbeinu's the complaint of Moshe Rabbeinu that his numbers are not big enough as the numbers of the Eibishter. The question really here, whether he didn't complain, putting a number on it. The Eibishter says, Miyuchal limonis, can count it. So Rashi brings down, it's not like 1,000 kichoil. It's the whole idea of taking something a limit. In other words, the numbers itself that Moshe Rabbeinu gave is pretty sizable numbers. There's not a problem with that. The question is, why do you have to b'chlal give numbers? Do without number. Eden Zayin and Damut given. Why is that not such a problem? Not a limit, because Eden were then Shishim Ribu. They were 600,000. So it's Hagavorim, Bnei Esrim. That's talking about the males who were 20 years old, Ad Shishim Shana, up to 60 years old. The Kumtzu, the two Kumtzu Gvorim Ad Bnei Chof. To add to that, you have to have the men's up to 20 years, from 0 to 20 years, which is beyond the 600,000, and Lamailo Mishishim, and those who were above 60 years old, Unoshim and women, and then the Taf and the little children. I'm assuming that the Taf, meaning the Rebbe here means the girls, Taf, because there are mentions already up to Bnei Chof, the males is, but in either way. So Veder Cheshbon Zayin L'Kol HaPoches, so the number will be minimally Arum 2 million. 2 million was like 2 million. So then we say it should be 1,000 times 2 million. Ela Pa'omim, then Mispor, V'Zayin Be'erech 2 billion. So that would be approximately 2 billion. is in Pshuter Shel Mikra legt sich nicht. In the simple text, in the reading the Pasuk, it doesn't really fit. If them kommen mit der Teine, that you're going to come with an argument, Hayitochen as ein Volk zählt nur 2 billion. How come that one nation only amounts to 2 billion people? So logically, that wouldn't be an argument saying that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say big enough because he only said 1,000 times as much and not more. That's a pretty sizable and that's huge. And it's a big number. That wouldn't be a complaint. Besides that, the Rebbe said, where are you going to fit 2 billion people into the limited area of the world? The first Rebbe brings down actually that 1,000 doesn't necessarily mean exactly 1,000. We're talking about approximately 1,000. This is in addition to Tzizrogil. It's common as mit elef when we say 1,000 times. Meint man it bediuk elef. We don't mean exactly 1,000. But say 1,000 times. 1,000 means like in an exaggeration or in a large number. This was also more than 1,000. We can explain in the words of Moshe that doesn't mean only limited to 1,000. 1,000 times can be more so. And then we come to the other problem. We need to all fit into this world. On the physical earth, especially when how much the multiple of Jews, the number of Jews that can be on the face of the dry land, is doch nit a ribu v'kirch. It's not possible to have so many people, so many yidden on the dry land as there is stars in the sky. And to be like the sand of the earth in Chol Hayam and the sand of the ocean. Because the area of the dry land of the globe of the earth, it has a specific measurement. Quoting from Chazal, that the world is 6,000 parses. Each person takes up a 4 amas space. So therefore you can calculate, and you can imagine, how many people can be, if them ganzen Shetach HaYabosha are able to be on the entire area of the dry land from Kadra Oretz, from the globe of the world. How many physically can fit on the globe? Each one needs Daled Amis, and it's for 6,000 parsa. So how many can fit? Befrat noch, as a Zayin Faran, and it's not going to be only Yidden over there. Zayin Faran, there exists, and as well as it will be Oich Los also in the future to come. Oich Andere Umas, there will be other nations as well. And Balachayim, and animals, and Botim, and houses, and so there's Ukramim, and fields and orchards. Everything takes up place. So there's not really able to have much more. And more, and the main thing is, we're not talking about the whole globe over here. We're talking about in Eretz Yisrael, because that's where Yidden should be. Yidden is a richtiger Ortloi Torah, Yidden in their proper place according to Torah, in Eretz Yisrael, So, about Eretz Yisrael, the Gemara says, is the Stakia Eretz Hatzvi. It's considered the land of the deer. And the Gemara explains that that Israel expands according to the inhabitants. The more inhabitants it stretches, just as the skin of the deer is stretched on the deer. If once you have removed the skin, you can never put it back onto the deer because it won't fit. It shrinks. And likewise, Eretz Yisrael, when the Yidden are there, it increases. Otherwise, it shrinks. So even notwithstanding, so it does increase, but still, aber als nor a tail from the ganze Yabasha. Israel's only, Eretz Yisrael is only a part of the entire dry land. So it's understood, as the Mispar Biful mentioned, that the number of how many people Askenaz Gefinin in the Mshetach Kader Oretz are able to find themselves to be together in this area of the globe of the world is as Asach Kleiner. It is much less from the Meribu Mufluk from Afara Oretz, from the tremendous numbers of the sand of the earth. You can't have people like the sand of the earth living on the Yabash at the same time. Uncholayom, or the sand which is by the sea. Obefrat alle zusammen, and especially to have them all together. So, therefore, that's not such a possibility. So, saying about 2 million people, first of all, 1,000 times would be 2 billion. And even 1,000 times is not exact, so it means even more than 2 billion. And we are talking about the filling an area of the world which is limited. So besides that, so therefore is mikra. So therefore, when we learn the Chumash in the Pashtus, Yosef Aleichem Kochem Elef Pa'amim, say that Hashem will add 1,000 times to you. It doesn't contradict the blessing, above mentioned blessing. The ribuy from Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu is gizog geworden b'derech hasholem, because the Eibishter says it's a borrowed name to say that the Eibishter is going to make you like the sand and like the stars. This great number of the blessings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was said b'derech hashola. It's like an exaggeration. It's a borrowed saying that it's going to be like nit mamish. It doesn't mean literally the stars of the heavens, the sand of the earth, the earth of the world, and the sand of the ocean. So, on one hand, that doesn't mean literally like the stars, like the sand, like the dirt. And on the other hand, saying Elep Amim, Hasten Bahashola Blimispar, and saying 1,000, if you're just using borrowed as an exaggeration, it could be without a number. So the contrast between the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, Pshuta Shel Mikra, with the bracha of the Eibishter is not such a contrast. So therefore, Rashi doesn't have a problem that there is an inherent problem in our pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu was limiting Hashem's brachas that we learned before. But therefore, Rashi has another problem. Since it says a second time, let him bless you as he has spoken to you, is muchach. So this is evident as Moshe Hadosh gemusst Moshe sein as answer that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to add this as a response. He's saying on an argument and a question that the Yidden had. The Rebbe sagt Rashi, that's what Rashi says. As Yidden haben gesagt, that Yidden said, Moshe aton noisim kitzva libirchoseinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, they're saying, you're giving a limit to our brachas. And what is the question? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Avraham, Asherim Yuchal Ishlimon is given. The Yish's promise of Avraham that you won't be able to count. It doesn't say Kichich Vashamayim, it doesn't say Kichil Hayom, it doesn't say like the Medrash, like the Sifri, but it says you can't count. Because the Rebbe will explain the argument is not so much that the number is greater by Hashem than Moshe Rabbeinu is limiting them. But the problem is, why is there a count? Period. Should be no count. But if posik asherim yuchel ish limonis, if a person can count, so Rashi says there, kishem sheyafshel la'ofer lihimonis, just as offer cannot be counted. Also, your seed will not be counted. Say is verstandig. So based on this, is understood that it can't be counted. Not so much that there's a big number. That the blessing of Hashem is given nicht as his own sign, as they feel before Suda for Haaretz. Not that they should be so much as there is sand in the earth, they should be that much. A great number. Not as but because there is so much, such a great number, then they just won't be counted. It's not counted. Sand is not counted. Not because it's a big number, it's just it's not countable. So this was the question that the Yidden had. You are giving a limit to our blessings. Since Hashem promised, it will be such a great number. That it is not totally unusual to count it. Your children will not be counted. So why is he saying a number? 1,000 times. As if they will be counted. He's giving a number to be counted. Notwithstanding that it's a huge number, I said before, it's a big bracha, but why limit it to a number? Even though it's a can mean an aribu also could mean a tremendous number, a lot. When we get at freer, as discussed earlier, as this can mean in derech guzma, that by a way of an exaggeration, this can actually mean even more than 1,000 times as much. Is as fortanin from kitzvah, it's still a aspect of a limit. They are counted and they're measured mit an erech v'yachas to their misport was is ein damut given. It has a comparison, and it's measured with a relationship and compared to the number. It's still a comparable number. We think 1,000 times to what they were. Was is ein damut given? They were then, whatever their number is, kochem elepamim, 1,000 times of that. So it's still a numbered, a huge number, but it's still numbered. This is the difference between the Sifri and the Medrash and the way Rashi learns it. Leuten Sifri Medrash is the Taina to Moshe. According to the Medrash, the argument to Moshe, you are giving a limit that he's giving a smaller limit number than the Eibishter gave. As Moshe zokt asach hakladra mispar, that Moshe is giving a much smaller number of Yifuliden as well in Zion, how much Jews there will be. Lekabe, when you measure it relative, the Ribu Muflik from the Eibishter's bracha, relative to the tremendous number of the blessing of Hashem. As well Zion ki choich v'Hashemayim. On Kafara, it says they're going to be like the stars of the heaven, like the sand of the earth. He's giving them a tremendous, it's a limitation to that. Because the Rebbe brings it in Sifri. That's why the Sifri brings down, Frier dem Spetteling Pasuk. It brings down first the Pasuk that comes later, to tell us that we're actually talking about make your sand like the stars of the heavens, so which emphasizes that we're talking about numbers over here, not that you can't count, but a big number, because over there, it doesn't say that you can't count it. It just says, this explains. That's why Sifri brings down that pasuk, even though it comes later, as the pasuk, as euch der pasuk, besamti as rachel kafar ha'oretz. But also this pasuk, we're translating that pasuk that it doesn't mean literally because it means that's just not countable. Not that there's a large number, but the Sifri learns that it is a large number. He first brings down like Chechva Shemayim, where this doesn't say over there that you can't count them, so it means a big number. So that means, according to Sifri, that also this pasuk sometimes we're talking really that it's a tremendous number. That's what the is. So this is according to the Sifri and the Medrash. According to Rashi, however, is a taina atonis in kitzeli berchenu. The Berach is saying that you're giving a limit for brachas. Not even kamus hamispar. It's not on the quantity, how much the number is. Nor those verses zoktav zeh hamispar. The cloud that he's saying a number of them. B'shas that Eibishtot maftiach given. When Hashem promised, as they will need time to get a mispar, they're not going to be defined by a number altogether. There is no number over there. The Liber bringt nicht den Pasuk. That's why Rashi does not bring the verse Hashemayim, stars of the heaven, the sand of the Yom was by Zay Yishayach I get the Mispar Canal. Over there, it could be a large number, but you can still count them. It is not really unlimited. Nor the Pasuk Asherim Yuchel Ishlim Gomer Canal. But you can't count it. It's not accountable, but not to bring something a number. That's why Rashi does not bring those. Sukkim answers the Rebbe's question. Rashi's Medaik. So that's why Rashi does not start off with a question, because it's not a contradiction. It's a big number. But since there is a repetitive over here, he says again, he says again, that means that there is a additional bracha here and answering the argument. And what's the argument according to Rashi? Why put down a number when the Abishah says there is no number? Okay, so that's the way Rashi looks. For them is Moshe's answer. So Moses Zion. Them on this, what is Moshe Rabbeinu's answer? Zoom Ishali. That's my blessing. But he, Hashem, will bless you as he told you. The bracha was ergit is oich Yosef Hashem. It's not that he's giving his bracha void of Hashem. He's saying his bracha is that Yosef Hashem. He's also saying Yosef Hashem. The bracha was the Eibishter git. He's giving you the bracha the Eibishter git. The bracha is Mishali. Since the bracha is mine, which means Zoktus, he's the one that's saying is Ver the bracha von hem gesehen. Therefore, his bracha is seen as Ubemeile euch gesagt, and therefore it's also said that so it's a limit. But Hashem, he will bless you. Like he spoke to you. The bracha vet mekuyim werden. That bracha, it's the same bracha. The bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu gives is the same bracha that the Eibishter gives. I am saying it in a way of kitzvah, but who that same bracha the Eibishter will actually bless you? The bracha vet mekuyim werden wie der Eibishter benched. It will become as the Eibishter benches you, not like I'm saying. It's not different. The same bracha comes in a much greater form. As the person can count it, you won't be able to count it. The hasbara in them is euch mevuir in the Loshen. Why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu is limited by when he says Yosef Hashem Aleichem? He can only say Elapam and not the Eibishter gives Belikvul without a number. In the Loshen. So why is that? Is explained in the language that he says Yosef Aleichem Kochem, on you as you are. Moshe Vibald it is Abosar Vadom, since he's a human being, flesh and blood. Amugbal b'mokim, he's limited in space. Unin azman besuyim, and in a specific time. Ken sich nit oistan from gevul, he cannot undress himself, to remove from himself limitation. From the mispar eden, he can't go. It's kochem. Was zet he says kochem as he sees for his eyes. Bench say sein broche bench say and he blesses them. He looks at them, he blesses them. He sees, what does he see? Sein bracha is Yosef Aleichem Kochem. May Hashem add as you are, because that's what I see. Shenk in the bracha from Eibishter, as opposed to the blessing of Hashem, was said is Nidbagren, it's Klau, who is not limited at all. Zayin Havtochet to Avromen. So Hashem promises to Avrom, Asher Yuchod Im Lishnois V'Goymer Gam Zeracha Yimona. If anybody can count you see it will be counted, meaning you can't count them at all. Damel, he sees them then, in the matzev, he sees them as they'll be in the situation, there'll be so much, they're not countable. Moshe Rabbeinu, as a human being, cannot give something different than the limitation that he is in as a human being, and he can just see the way they are, and to add to that 1,000 times, but the Eibishter is on a whole unlimited place, and he sees the Yidden the way they are, so he says totally, Ashim Yuchel Ish Limon is going. And then he brings an example, Dugma, Abalei Mamish. Example, it's not actually the same thing, that you see on one hand is by the Aseres HaDibros. So we have the 10 Dibros being said by Hashem in one, and then they come down in each one specifically. So there's an unlimited message. Aseres HaDibros from the Eibishter, everything together, and then yet it comes down to limit the 10 Dibros. Dugma, Avaloi Mamash, the Dover's example is the Aseres HaDibros, so the Eibishter gezok to the Eden. So the Eibishter said them to the Eden. He said B'dibur Echad. So it was to the Eden, but the Eibishter can say B'dibur Echad. That can come from the Eibishter. Und dennoch seinen euch gewähnt, die selbe Aseres HaDibros, and then there were also the 10 commandments, each one by itself. So there is the unlimited way altogether. Then you have the that Moshe Rabbeinu gives. Yes. Now the Rebbe is explaining the initial Torah that the two darges of a greater limit, the limitless of the Eibishter, this great number, versus the number that Moshe Rabbeinu has, is like Keser next to Atzilus. And the numbers that, and according to Rashi, this is according to Medrash and the Sifri, according to Rashi, the two numbers are Moshe Rabbeinu's number is the number of Bina within Atzilus, and the Eibishter's blessing is from the level of Chochmah. So the Rebbe explains now. The initial Torah Pirush Rashi, this is Mavur in Kisva Harizal. In the Kisva Harizal, it's explained, was Motzu Shabbos Kodesh Zeh, that year, and Motzu Shabbos was Hey Menachem Ov, is on Yortzeit, was the Yortzeit of the Harizal. So there is brought down in the Maimer Hanal was Moshe Gezogt, that this saying that Moshe said, Ad kan mishali, that this is mine, and from here on let him bless you like he spoke to you. So he says like this, Ki Moshe, the numerical value of Moshe is 345. The Gematria is the same Gematria as the name of Kel Shaddai. Kel Shaddai together is 345. So that's Moshe. And then the Oisya Zainam Aleim, if you take each one of the words Kel Shaddai, you spell it out. So Kazeh, as such, you have Aleph, the Aleph from the Kel, and the Lamed. You have Lamed Mem Dalet, Aleph Lamed Fei, Lamed Mem Dalet, and the Shin Yud Nun, and Dalet the Dalet Lamed Sof, and then you have the Yud of the Shaddai. Im HaKoilo together with the number again. Yalu, the Gematria, that will come out in the miracle value of Elef, be 1,000. What is this Elef? He, Elef Shel Bina. That is the 1,000th of Bina. Alefcha Chochma, Alefcha Bina. There is the level of Elef of Bina. It says Gisra Rizal. Ukoichel shel Moshe is given. So how much could Moshe say Mishali? What is Shali? His power went up to the level of Bina. Ad Ema. That's why he blessed him 1,000 times, because he can only go up to Bina. The Riber Zokter, and therefore he says, Ad Kan Mishali. This is mine. From the level of Bina, you get the level of Elf. From here on, let the bracha come from the supreme Abel, come from Chochmah. Moshe Rabbeinu gives them from his level, the level of Bina, which is the gematria, comes to Moshe, Keil Shaddai, and then you get it from the high level of Chochmah. So it says, Oich dem zetmen das Omer from Pshuta Shel Mikra Pnimis HaTorah. Here we see how the Pshuta Shel Mikra fits with Pnimis HaTorah, which means Rashi's Pshat fits in with the Kisva Harizal in the difference between Chochmah and Bina, between the Brach of the Eibishter, more than the interpretation of the Sifri and the Medrash, which over there it's more Keser and Atzilus. That's Barabas. Say what the explanation is. The Inyan from Bli Kitzva, Vidos is the Pirusha Sifri va Medrash. When we talk about the without a limit, according to the Sifri and the Medrash, Choch as dos meint need limisper b'poil, even though we're still not, we don't mean it. It actually doesn't have a count. It's just like an exaggeration. Borrowed saying it's a huge number. Is over the inyan from ein mispor afilu b'hashola. When you say not a number, even though you're using it as a borrowed, about the state in a state in Torah, there is some infinite over there. And inyan amiti, it says in Torah, so it's true. What does it mean it's true if it's not really in Poil Mamish? Das heißt, dass das, was mir sagt, dass Eden wollen sein, ki chich v'ashamayim kafar ha'oruz kichil hayom. When you say that they will be like the stars of the sky and like the sand of the earth and like the sand on the ocean, aribui was lo yisofer miroiv. It will be so much that you're not going to count it because so much. He says, val b'shorshay, because it's the root, nemt sich der lo yisofer, from Blimisper Hamiti, because it takes from the unlimited. So even though L'Poil Mamish, we're not talking about unlimited, but the reason why we're saying it's unlimited, because in its root, its taka doesn't have a number. Nor vidos vet nimshach be'elah. But since the way it does come down in the world, Basis Mugbal, which is a limited world, it comes down in a way that you can't actually count it. But it's rooted in a place where it's takablingo. Those haste, which means the agbole in misbar, in them was inzan kichich v'ashamayim kafarot kichil. This limitation in the number that the Yidden are like the stars of the skies, like the sand of the earth, and like the dust, like the sand on the ocean, is nit mitzat atzim vinyonim. It's not in essence because who they are. It's because that's the way they manifest itself when they come down to this world. Because of the way they came down into this world in the Elmazeh, but in truth and in the inner, is in Yonam, Shorsham, Lamaila, their aspect, their root above, is believe Mispar Hamiti is really without any limit. Loit Sifri Medrash comes out according to this Frina Medrash. As the Ribui Mufluk by Eden, Kichich Vashamayim, Kafara Orad, Kichela Yom, Vasloi Sofer Merev. Why is there taka that Ribui Mufluk? In Pnimius, where does it come from? This certain Nemtzivdos from Bechinas B'Ligvul Lamaila that comes from the unlimited level of Maila. From Oilam is Ein Sof Hecher from Atzilus. It comes from the world of Ein Sof, which is higher than Atzilus. Or Ribui B'Hagbola, and when we have a limited man was Oich B'Losh B'nei Odom, and then when you can also that limitation, and it's a lot, but it's a limited, which also people that root above is in the 10 spheres Datzilus. the root comes from higher than limitation, which is in Kesser, which is beyond Atzilus, beyond the limitation, beyond the Atzilus, and the Gevul is in Atzilus. Yeah, so, but euch wenn es retzich wegen Iden, diese seinen nicht berieben Mufla Kolkach, will das Rashi. When we're talking about the Eden, they're not in such a tremendous number because, according to Rashi, because we're saying it's not that the numbers are not fitting. It's just why is there a limitation in the numbers? Is the achilik zwischen Birchas Moshe and Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a difference between the Moshe's blessing and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As herzich de ha gebolo mispor shobehem Birchas Moshe. In the blessing of Moshe, you sense limitation. Elef pam, aber da gebolo herzich nit on bedugmas afar haaretz. But when you say that like Afar Haaretz, then you don't feel any limitation. Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessing of the Eibishter. When we bow, as alle Inyonim haben Masheresh L'mayla, since everything has a root above, is verstandig as the Sheresh for the Tzrei Inyonim L'mayla. So where is this root of these two matters, the limitation and the unlimitation? Where is this above? Is von Azama Drega, wo es ist da Kli Atzilus. It's a level where there is a Kel Atzilus, but dort hebt sich on der Ian is Chalkus Vagbola. Over there it starts the level of dividing and limitation. But that's where there's number. Und der Fahrt wird das Nimshach euch lemata in Hagbolo Mispar Bepoil euch belosh. That's why it also comes down below, even as we speak about it, it comes down. That's why by Moshe Rabbeinu, it comes down in the level of limitation, level of 1,000. Because so the difference between Moshe and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is whether we sense number or lo yuchol himonus. Over there we don't count it, so there is no sense. So this difference, whether we sense limitation or we sense infinite, is because of the roots above. And the reason is because it comes from Atzilus where there is Kalim. So over there, there is a sense of separation, of limitation. If we talk about the root, which is higher than the Kalim, the says for an order which is Nitokin Kalim, higher than Atzilus where there's no vessels, so then it comes down in the world and not number, without a number, like it is according to the Medrash and the Sifri. But over there is a huge number that comes from a place which is higher. But over here, it's all in a level from Atzilus. The difference between the two ways is Tzisa Herzich on der Inyan HaKelim or there's Herzich Nishtan, whether you sense that there is Kelim or not. So according to this, it turns out as Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Leitin Pirishas Sifri VaMedrash is Mibchanas HaKesef. That the blessing of Kadosh Baruch Hu according to the Sifri, the Medrash comes from Kesef, which is the talking Kelim. And that's why also in this world it comes down an unlimited amount. Ashenki Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Leitin Pirish Rashi is Mibchanas Chochma, comes from the level of Chochma. Was dort in seine do Kelim, there is still Kelim there. There is a Herren sich nicht done, but you don't hear the vessels. There's a bottle zum Eir. They're subjugated to the light. Because the far werd Chochma bechlal euch the Kelim Shabbat. That's why in Chochma in general, also the Kelim of Chochma angerufen Chayoy, because you don't sense them. The Kelim, they're mainly Eir. They're all Eiris. They're the life. They're Eiris. Birchas Moshe. So that's according to the Sifri and the Medrash, it's the level of Keser. And according to Rashi, it's the Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the level of Chochmah. Birchas Moshe, was herzich on the Inyan Agbola Mispar, and then by Moshe's bracha, in which you sense the limitation and the number, in Mebchinas Bina, is the level of Bina was dort in herzich on the Inyan Akeli, in which you sense the Keli. So they're both from Atzilus, but whether you sense the Keli or not, it's at Chochmah or Bina. Concludes that Durd and Limud in Torah in the Beidei Fanim. We learn Torah in both ways. Pshat, Bechlal Nigla Torah, the simple and generally the revealed part of Torah. But Sinyone Bechlolus is Misparship Torah. That's the number of Torah that's counted. Pnimis HaTorah, and the inner part of Torah, Torah Shel HaArizal. The teaching of the Arizal was Vider Arizal Gezogt. There is a Davki B'Deirus Elo Achronim. That specifically in these later generations, mutter and mitzvah legala zisa chochma, it is a mitzvah, it's permissible, and it's a mitzvah to reveal this chochma. It was b'yameinu nisgalsa. And today, how is the chochma revealed? B'toras Chassidus, in the teaching of Chassidus, in a way that they will be nurtured by it, and they'll provide the parnasa, which is Chassidus Chabad. What's his b'klolus that ain't social Torah? That's the unlimited part of Torah. Hecher farged the mispar, which is higher than mispar. It is an eifim for Torah achas. So we have one Torah. Man, we will merit for the time. From mispar b'nei Yisrael goymer, the number of Yisrael b'yashad lo yimed lo yisofer. You cannot measure, not count. Because v'zayin lost love will be in the future to come. B'kor of mamish very soon. This last piece in the explanation between from the Kisva Arizal and the difference between level of Chochmah Bina according to Rashi and the level of Keser and Atzilus according to the Sifri and the way that it all turns out in the limitation, the Brachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to be studied a little further. But for now, we'll leave it at this. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Devarim, Tov Shin Lamed Vav.